Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. My name is Ida, and I'm a former explorer, and I'm your host today for today's Explorer Talk X with the wonderful Jessica Brown. So, a little bit about Jessica. She is an experienced design leader with years of building teams and crafting award-winning digital products. She has worked in a number of different industries, including media, e-commerce, and logistics. She's currently a staff product designer at Fair Wholesale, where she works on tools to help independent brands and retailers thrive. In past roles, she has led design and user research team at Vice Media, Rent the Runway, and Clutter Storage. Her academic background is more on the techie side, having studied math and computer science at Stanford University. And her work spans several levels, including helping organizations evolve design practices, creating space for designers to do their best work, and ultimately designing experiences that serve users and deliver results. Jessica, thank you so much for being here and giving us your time.
Thank you for having me.
So I would say let's kick off with a few career questions to get to know more about your background, how you got there, stuff like that. So my first question to you would be, how did your earlier career choices lead you to where you are now?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I started out being a hybrid designer and engineer, so took the role that I could get with my technical background, which was stronger than my design background at the beginning. But I would say I've made three big career shifts. The first was shifting from that hybrid design engineering role into just doing design, which took probably a year or two of building up my portfolio to be able to effectively communicate my skills on the design side and get those types of roles. Then I made a transition from being a individual designer into being a manager. And I had a really wonderful manager at Rent the Runway who actually advocated for me and suggested that I step into that role. And I learned a lot by doing and realized that I really loved that type of work. So stayed there for several years, but my most recent transition has been from a manager back to an individual designer. I think during the pandemic, spending so much time on Zoom, I realized that I was getting so energized by the design work itself. And so I looked for a team that would be a place I could learn from, a larger team, more peers. And so it was exciting to shift again. And who knows what the next step will be. But I would say the theme is just getting clear about what I actually want and then creating a path to get there.
That's really cool. So that actually leads into my next question, which would be, so since you've transitioned a couple of times and aren't like didn't actually start in the role you are now, what advice would you give someone who wants to set off in a similar direction as you?
Yeah, I think just getting clear on your own wishes and really listening to that inner voice that says, hey, I like doing this. Can I do more of this? I think for me, listening to myself and following my curiosity has been really a powerful unlock to take me to that next opportunity, and getting clear with myself lets me get clear with other people and have conversations that actually evaluate if something will be a good fit and will bring me toward that next role. I would also say being willing to step out of the comfort zone is big. We are all constantly learning. And if your career takes you to new places, you will always end up feeling a little bit like you don't know what you're doing at certain points. And that's to be expected. In an academic setting, we're kind of can be trained to always do well and feel like I need to achieve, I need to master. But a career can be a little bit different from that, in that you're learning new domains and making moves and exploring something new. And you will be a beginner at times. So embracing that, I think, has helped me take these different steps.
Definitely. That's definitely a running theme with explorers, like taking more risks, being a bit more out there. So actually, I'm curious to know, like, what is the biggest risk you've taken in your career?
I've taken a few, but I think the biggest risk was starting a company. So several years ago, I was a co-founder at a company called Threadflip, which is not there anymore. They got acquired, but I was really interested in this mission of selling secondhand clothing and seeing women able to repurpose, give new life to clothes, accessories, objects that had been previously loved. And so I stepped out on a limb. I joined a really small team. There were 4 people when I joined, so 3 co-founders and 1 engineer, and I was coming in as the 4th co-founder. We went through this big fundraising round, which was new, stressful, scary, but learned a ton going to pitch these VCs on our ideas. And we ultimately successfully raised a round. But any startup has a lot of risks. There are growing pains, there are product challenges, and there are team dynamic differences. And I discovered through some time that my co-founders and I didn't share a vision for exactly what we wanted to create. So my experience of trying and succeeding in some places there and failing in others, I think is super valuable and I have no regrets about it. But that was taking a chance. And yeah, probably the biggest risk I've taken.
That's really cool. So like having already had an experience of starting your own business, you were also an advisor at some point to startup companies, weren't you?
Yes.
Cool. So, what are some questions that you believe are very important for entrepreneurs to ask themselves before they start their projects?
I think one is just the depth of interest in that space. So asking yourself, what makes you really passionate about the problem that you're solving? And there are a lot of different potential answers there. I don't think you need to be your own end user to be truly passionate about a space, but you need to connect with it for some reason and be excited about the opportunity and what you'll be delivering. I have some friends who have worked on projects like helping contractors bill their customers more effectively. And while that might not seem like a sexy space, getting connected to that mission and really being able to hone in on that realization of why you're pursuing this problem is very important. I think it helps you sell other people on joining your team. It helps you pitch your company. And long term, it just helps you stay connected when there will be ups and downs. So that's a big one. And the other question I think entrepreneurs can be asking themselves is, how will you build your core team? How will you go out and find the people that you need to work with? Um, a lot of, in a different vein, a lot of startups do start out with one idea and end up moving around. And what makes them successful is ultimately the team and the people that they have around them. So figuring out, how can I tap my bench? How can I connect with the right people? How can I evaluate skills if I don't have them, but I need them on my team? I think those are really important questions to be asking early on.
Yeah, definitely. That's actually been quite a common questions with explorers is because we've got loads of solo entrepreneurs in the Explorer program. And a lot of the times they would ask like, what is the most important thing when building a team? Or what, for example, my question for you then would be, what are the tips to ensure that the team will work in the future?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's no one size fits all here, but I think there are some general pieces of advice that go a long way. And the first one I would say is expectation setting. So if you're early on in a company, you have to focus your hires and you have to pick exactly which skill sets are most important at that time. So take design, for example. Design is a big field. You can find people with the title designer who do everything from wireframing, early concepting to high fidelity prototyping to even illustration or iconography. And these can be very different focus areas. So getting crisp on, okay, we actually don't need the icon designer. We need the UX designer who can do a little bit of a lot of things. That role definition is really important, getting clear with your team and getting clear with your candidates. I think the other piece is having a transparent and open dialogue with your candidates, being honest about what's challenging in your organization, what will be ahead if you anticipate, hey, we're doing this fundraising round. This might mean these things. I mean, limit your transparency to what makes sense for your business, but being honest about the challenges, in addition to what will a candidate learn? What will they be doing in their role? Will there be places for them to grow and explore and try out new things? I think it's much, much harder to hire people and then try to go back and make it fit. So starting off with clarity on what do you want this person to do and are they aligned with that?
Yeah, definitely. So I feel like, especially with that and with loads of other things, there is lots of room, or not lots of room, but entrepreneurs usually have a lot of mistakes in the beginning, and it's more of a learning process. So, for you, what are some things that you've noticed startup companies overlook that are extremely important in the beginning?
Yeah, I think one area that can get overlooked is just the value and importance of marketing. I am not a proponent of if you build it, they will come. If you build it and it's great, you will still need to tell them about it, have them discover your product, have them discover your brand, and do a bit of storytelling. And sometimes people think organic marketing will be enough, but even if you want to invest in more organic marketing, you'll still need to spend the time and effort and energy on content creation that will resonate and carry into those places. So I think being mindful of how you budget for your marketing, how you plan to test into different channels, how you think about content creation, those things, they can go overlooked. And I've seen it happen. I've seen companies even miss opportunities with seemingly more simple, basic channels like SEO just because they didn't adequately give it the time that it needed to just get through those best practices. So that is one thing that's important. The other thing I would say that is important early in company building is proper self-care, especially for founders. Building a company is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And yes, there are milestones that feel like a hustle, that feel like you are moving really quickly, but it's a long-term endeavor. And I've talked to some founders in the past who would say things like, oh, I'm spending all my time on this. It's my top priority. I'm not sleeping that well. I'm not eating that well. I'm not exercising. And to me, that's a little bit toxic. And I think creating the right balance, like, yes, this will be a lot of your time and energy and effort, but you also need to sustain yourself and sustain the rest of your life that gives energy to this project and this company. So I think creating that and being deliberate about that at the beginning just can set you on an easier course.
Yeah, that's such an important thing to think about, and for every entrepreneur, really. Um, so given that, like, there's to market your product well, you really need to know your market, and to you need to test, like, um what your market is. What would be your top tips for entrepreneurs who are starting their hypothesis testing in order to make sure they have a good product market fit?
I think the faster you can get to realistic prototypes to put in front of your audience, the better. Learning to create those prototypes will teach you a lot, and actually putting them in front of your end users, there's there's nothing else like it. They will show you where you've made assumptions that you didn't even know. So to get there, you'll want to get specific about your audience, really understand who they are. You'll want to learn about their needs, think about underserved areas, so places that you're learning about the problems that they're trying to solve. Are there things that don't work particularly well about the way that they're doing it today? And could you answer for those in your product? And then getting to that prototype, really focusing those prototypes and making them something that you would realistically begin and build. Um, I think that can be really valuable. And the other side of this is listening and interviewing and being able to hear what your audience is saying. So interviewing and user research is definitely a skill set. I think there are some core basics you can get to more quickly, but learning how to avoid bias in questions and avoid trying to seek out the answer you want from a conversation is pretty important, and is difficult. Asking open-ended questions, really important to expose things that you might not be thinking about, but might be at the top of your audience's mind. And the last one is just learning to ask the right follow-up questions, learning to listen carefully and say, hey, wait, this person seemed really frustrated about this thing, or they seemed really excited about this thing. Maybe I won't just keep going down my list of questions, but I'll ask something else. on that topic. So I think the hypothesis testing, getting to your end users as quickly as possible with something you can show them and something you can get a reaction to is incredibly valuable.
Yeah, definitely. So I feel like for it would be really nice to have like a little bit more context for our explorers. So for example, when you started your own business or when you were helping other businesses, what kind of questions were they asking, depending if they were a service, like providing a service or providing a product? What did you see was a good way to ask these questions, or what kind of questions did they end up asking?
Yeah. So I have a friend who right now is working on a platform to help creative businesses work with their clients more effectively. So think about the design agency, they have this client, the client gives feedback. Where is the feedback tracked? How are the assets that got delivered organized? And so she put together interactive prototypes. Somebody at the end can click through them, can see the functionality, and basically ask them to do a certain set of tasks. Okay, you're creating a new project. You want to track the agency that you're managing. But then as we went through it, there were questions like, are there things you don't understand? Would you actually use this product? Why not? And then following the thread of, okay, you said this might not be useful, but what else are you using today? How well is that working? Um, just letting the conversation go where your subject is kind of taking it and figuring out, okay, they're telling me this about it. And I'm kind of speaking because I was one of her test subjects. So I think she did a good job of navigating that conversation. And I was candid with her about, okay, here are the points that I would and wouldn't use it. Um, I think it takes a little bit of iteration and trial and error, but yeah.
Yeah, that's really so going off of that actually. So being a user and being like a test product kind of tester. So when designing for a user, what should we apply as a rule number one? And like where should we start and what should we really avoid?
I think again, the rule number one is trying to get realistic feedback efficiently. Um, so going through those cycles will teach you a lot. Say you go through one interview cycle and you learn some things and you make some changes and you go back to similar users and you have another round of conversations. Things to avoid, I think, are making unstated assumptions. So assumptions are fine. We all make assumptions in the work that we do about what our users might want, what the business might want. For example, we might think something about setting a price or thinking about our differentiation in the market. And that is totally fine. I think the thing to avoid is assumptions that are invisible and don't get put forward. So if you make those assumptions and you never question them, okay, we think our audience segment is this. We haven't validated that, but at least putting down on paper, we believe this is our type of audience because of these reasons. And that will let you see, okay, one, do different people on our team have different perspectives about that? And two, as you go along, you can actually assess if that's true or not because you stated it, and so there's something to go back to and say, hey, our assumption was right, or hey, our assumption maybe needs a little bit of updating because we've learned some new information.
Nice. That's really good to know. So how would you say in the last 5 years, through your experience, that user experience has changed? So, what are the points that we can take into account now that really were kind of different, maybe 5 years ago, or even small changes that really matter now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the 5 year arc is interesting where I wouldn't say it's a hugely visible difference, but just the expectations of mobile and cross device usage continue to be stronger and stronger. Users really do expect all the same features across platforms. They expect continuity. And now I see apps doing a better job of indicating, hey, this piece isn't on our mobile website. You need to go, or a mobile app. You need to go to the website and here's how to get there. There's that sense of a handoff that I don't think was present 5 years ago, really. It was sort of, well, if they come here and try to do this thing, we just won't let them do that. And now there's more of a sophistication around we should really try to deliver everything across platforms because people expect it. And if we can't, we need to handhold them and walk them through that. The other piece, again, is subtle, but the expectations of page speed and load time, I think, continue to increase as people's bandwidth gets faster, as they spend more time on smaller screens on the go. So it can be very invisible, especially when you're thinking about product and design all day. You might not think as much about, does my page load quickly? Does my experience feel snappy? But it is really, really important, and people's expectations for those things are incredibly high.
And would you say this can kind of require like continuous testing, like even before, like yes, of course, before you release the product, you have to test, but ha would it require also like getting feedback consistently throughout having a project, or how would you go about this?
On the speed piece, I would say it's not necessarily feedback consistently, but it's more of a testing process, like an engineering driven testing process, because those types of tests can be more easily automated to say, hey, how fast are these different pages loading? How fast are these interactions feeling? Are transitions looking quick and setting the right expectation that this whole experience is very responsive and dynamic? If you don't have those automated pieces, yes, I think you can go in and on the speed side, you could even test yourself rather than needing to rely on a user.
Nice. So of course, for a lot of this stuff, you would really need to be like a bit more creative. And sometimes as an entrepreneur with all of this stress, you can kind of hit this wall where it's like you feel you've hit this creative wall. So what would you like, what techniques would you recommend for creative thinking and for enhancing this thinking as an entrepreneur?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. I think entrepreneurship is inherently a very creative pursuit because you are bringing something into existence that hasn't been there before and setting this vision and trying to imagine something being in the world that's not. To fill the well creatively, I think there are a lot of different techniques and tactics, but a foundation for that is just holding a growth mindset, believing that you can continue to learn and evolve. You can learn new skills that you've never tried and applied before, and you really take that to heart and believe if I wanted to learn piano tomorrow, I would have a path to do it and I could keep getting better and better at it if I applied myself. And creativity is kind of the same way. It can be a bit of a muscle. And some of the fun techniques I think are pretty simple, like a brainstorming exercise. Look up the Stanford D Schools method. It's a pretty straightforward framework for how do I generate ideas? How do I avoid critique right in the moment of idea generation? The basic container is you set a certain amount of time, you set a prompt for yourself and your team, and you come up with as many ideas. So it's quantity over quality. You could do that with a marketing exercise. Say you wanted to name something, just come up with as many names as you can in 5 minutes, in 10 minutes. I know designers who do things like this every day. Come up with all the applications, all the ways that you could use a brick. Sounds strange, but flexing that muscle and going through that routine, I think can help you build up your imaginative muscle. Um, the last thing I'll say on this topic, because I feel very passionately about it, is just breaking away from the routine of being in screen mode. So going for a walk, going for a run, uh, doing your housework. A lot of people have epiphanies in the shower after they've been thinking about a problem for a long time. And so I think giving yourself the mental space to wander and to come back to things and to think deeply about things can also lead to that moment of, aha, I've broken through. I have this great idea that I've been wanting to unlock.
Yeah, amazing advice because that definitely happens when you're just like constantly getting information. It's kind of a bit overwhelming. So have you ever experienced that before, like coming into this kind of creative block and like how did you get out of it if you have?
Yeah, I have 100% experienced the creative block many times. And I think a couple of things that I like to do are one, break apart a problem. So, say I'm trying to design a whole new page or experience, really making that bite sized and saying, okay, exactly what does this need to do? It needs to do this, 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 this. Maybe there are 5 things on the list and thinking about tackling them one at a time. So that can help just feel like I'm putting one foot in front of the other. I'm taking bites out of this problem that is bigger and more complex. The other is, again, going for quantity over quality, just saying, okay, my first drafts might not be what I'm happy with. In fact, they're likely to be something that I'm not truly happy with. But if I keep going and make 5 versions, make 10 versions, I'll start to move towards something that I do feel more confident in, and there might be new ideas, but that generative process and being graceful with myself and not critical that the first version isn't what I want can help me get there through those iterations.
Thank you. Thank you so much for answering my questions. I think now would be a really good time to move on to the questions of the explorers and have see what they have sent us. So, our first question would be, how can I approach my client when I'm not sure where exactly he or she is? And should I use assumption as a tool?
Okay, so this sounds like you're working with a new client, you don't totally understand the context of the problem, or things are unstated. And yes, I think assumption is a very powerful tool there, being able to say back to them, okay, I think what you're telling me is that this is the problem space, this is the solution you have in mind. This is what I would imagine your other constraints might be. Maybe it's about their user demographic, or maybe it's about the technical side of their solutions, or any number of assumptions. I think echoing that back to them can help you unearth their assumptions, can help you frame up your solution. So definitely a powerful technique.
Cool. So, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this name right, but No Mi Alonso, Noel, okay, I'm not going to butcher that anymore. Ask, is it possible to design a workspace to improve creativity?
Oh, I love this question. I think yes. Um, you can have a workspace that helps you be more creative. And maybe that's so let's think about the physical workspace. You could have things around you that let you break off the screen, or let you um, for example, right now, I have my handy clipboard with me and a pen in case I want to do any drawings or take any notes. So having those types of tools around you physically, maybe it's markers, maybe it's stickers, maybe it's things to just quickly get ideas down. Other things, this is very much coming from a designer, but an organized desk and a space with color or things that feel inspiring is just a little thing that can brighten your day and bring that energy to your projects. But the last thing is thinking about your digital workspaces and the tools that you use. And I've seen a lot of cross functional teams, so not just designers, hop into a tool like Figma, which I love, to do wireframes or flow charts or brainstorming digitally. And so those tools online, I think, can bring teams together and spur your own creativity.
Thank you. So Paulina asks, how can you test the concept before the interface?
That's a great question. You can do things that are much more straightforward. You can put forward just text descriptions of a concept. I've seen companies thinking about a subscription service talk to potential users and give them 3 index cards. And each index card had a different formulation of the subscription. And they had people react just to those concepts and reading about them. So no prototypes involved, just the short and sweet summary of how would you pitch this to someone? How would you want people to tell their friends about this product so that it feels like human language and approachable language in communicating those concepts?
Nice. So we've already talked about the um, challenges that entrepreneurs may face before they begin their projects. But Carla asks, what do you consider are the main threats and challenges that new entrepreneurs will confront in the upcoming future?
Great question. I think the macro fundraising environment and just the attitude about growth at all costs has really changed, where 5, 10 years ago, the ethos about getting funding was let's go through this funding, let's get to the next level as quickly as possible. And now I think there's more of an attitude of let's see companies get to profitability more quickly. So we don't just want to see them scale fast. We want to see that they're able to make money, even if they're scaling more slowly. So I think that's something all entrepreneurs today should be keeping in mind is the lessons learned by, say, Uber or other companies that got big very quickly, but haven't demonstrated that cash flow are just not the same in today's environment.
So, of course, with um, this is my question with like entrepreneurs, like or entrepreneur ventures nowadays, the success rate is like not as huge as you'd want it to be. So, what would you say are like big reasons why entrepreneurs may not succeed in the beginning, and like how could they avoid that right now?
Yeah, there's no one size fits all answer here, but I think that just the venture environment drives people toward trying to grow a company very quickly and trying to scale and trying to get to those next rounds. I've seen other entrepreneurs take different paths. And for example, the founder of a company called Gumroad, which does digital digital sales and is a way for people to make money off of their creations, that founder took a different path and decided to not pursue growth at all costs and has a sustainable business, but hasn't developed in the way that a lot of companies in this ecosystem try to. So it's a different form of success. It's not getting to unicorn status IPO, but it's being able to continue pursuing this idea for a long time and develop this audience, develop this company, keep growing, but at a different pace. And so I think people not should, there's no shoulds here, but can seriously consider whether that type of path makes sense for them, because the failure rate for venture backed startup is really high. And I don't know that there's totally obvious ways to avoid that.
Mhm. Thank you. So, Palma or Palm, it is always said that you have to be passionate about what you do or the solution you provide, but can't you be obsessed with wanting to start a business? Can you just be obsessed with wanting to start a business?
It's a really personal question. I think, yes, it's more like your passion for the space might be more connected to, I want to grow this amazing business. I want to have this amazing team around me. And you hopefully do connect with your mission of the company and why you care about this specific mission. But I think that kind of passion can propel you forward. Say you're working in construction billing and you've never worked in construction and you're not particularly passionate about that, but you love the way that you're growing your company, you love the way that you're growing your team, you're really interested in learning about the space. I do think that's enough.
Mhm. Nice. So, another belief question is, do you believe that every company should have a design team to implement better strategies and make timely decisions?
Oh, that's a great question. You're asking someone who is very biased here, but I would say it does depend a bit on the product. Design can serve a lot of roles. So if you are designing a website, a mobile app, something with an interface, I think designers are pretty important to seeing that through and creating a product that meets today's standard, which again is high. We expect consumer grade products even for B2B services, even for our banks. Everything is starting to interact in a more consistent way, and a designer can help you get there. So I'm biased, but I would lean toward yes, unless you have a really special case where maybe you're working on AI models and there's a limited interface or something where there's not that interactivity that users expect.
So going off of creativity, which a design team can really help with, Lucifer asks, how challenging is it to get a service that provides creativity tools for personal or commercial purposes, to also work with, to work also in educational areas such as universities, etc.
So I think the question is what tools can help you work in these different areas?
So how challenging is it to get a service that provides creativity tools, yeah, for these purposes to work in like educational areas, including universities? It's a
I
bit of a
think,
challenging question.
well, I'm not sure if it's asking the tools that you'll use on your team or if it's about leveraging tools and selling them to these organizations. So I'll try answering both types of questions. The first one of can you get tools that you can access and use on your team? I think there's amazing tools today and they're pretty easy to find. So say Figma, or maybe you want to go with Sketch or Adobe, like these are all easily discoverable online. Some of them are powered by the internet and function as other interactive tools like Google Docs work. So I'm a strong proponent of Figma. But the second question of maybe reaching an audience of educators, I think is a more challenging one. I've seen companies try to strategize around how to reach an education market. And I think there's a strong sales angle where you're looking for decision makers within those institutions and trying to have conversations with them, which is not trivial. I don't think you can expect educational institutions to come find you. I think you can expect that there's more of a sales cycle and you find them and you figure out who to be talking to.
Yeah, educational facilities I feel like are very like one of the more difficult businesses to deal with. Um, so Marcos asks, how can we get people to connect with our innovation proposal when they are used to a more traditional way of thinking, and this may generate some doubts or uncertainty?
Yeah, I think that's always going to be a challenge, right? Because whether you're selling a VC or you're selling a partner to join you, or you're trying to bring on a new hire, or trying to sell something within your organization that might be risky. Uh, it's all about sizing people's appetite for risk, interest in the area, interest in the idea. So if you were pitching something internal to your organization, I think understanding how much time and energy does my organization want to spend on this type of new concept and new exploration? Um, how can I size up and get a read on this maybe before I make the pitch so that I'm coming in informed about how my organization thinks or how this particular stakeholder thinks?
Great, thank you. And so for our last question, it's from Veromora, and they ask, how do you get right, true answers in surveys? Because people lie a lot of the times.
Oh, if only I had a perfect unlock there. I think starting points are phrasing things in a way that doesn't make people feel bad about answering with their true feelings. So, for example, say you had a question where you want to understand people's habits and you believe that people will want to tell you that they exercise more than they do. Maybe you would find a way to frame these types of questions so that it doesn't make it sound like they're giving a wrong answer, or that it pushes them toward that white lie or lie. Um, Also, just reframing and asking similar questions, you might uncover that, okay, if I phrase the question one way, how many times per week do you exercise? People want to say 3 times or 5 times. But if you ask them, when was the last time you exercised? That sounds perhaps more neutral. And they'd go, okay, within the last week, within the last month. And that sounds more innocuous and maybe easier for them to answer truthfully. But I think both the rephrase, the follow up, and trying to give people space to be honest without making it sound like they're giving a wrong answer.
Yeah, not like you're judging them, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's basically it for our session on Twitch today. I would just like to ask you if there's one thing you would like to leave our explorers off with to continue their journey, a phrase or something that's inspired you for a long time, what would it be?
I have a phrase that I got this cool meditation painting where the artist held this mantra as she was creating the painting. And it's my sense of play lights my way. So I love the idea that your own curiosity can keep propelling you forward, that you can keep trying to ask yourself the big questions and look for the things that you're most passionate about and unearth that sense of play. So I think I would end on that.
Thank you so much. I really love that. So I really hope each and every one of you enjoyed this talk. It was a pleasure having you, Jess. Thank you so much for being here and giving us your time.
Yes, thank you so much. Really loved our conversation, Ida.
Me too. Thank you.